Welcome back to another episode of Rail Industry Connected. I'm Dan Clark, and thank you for joining us. Social value is an increasingly important topic for rail businesses, not only because it's become a major tender question, but also because rail is helping so many communities across the country. Long gone are the days of a token financial gesture to sponsor youth sports teams or support a charity. Social value is about tangible differences to help people of all ages understand the railways better, how they can progress in rail careers, and how they can use the railway safely. Today, we're speaking to a company that's working hand in hand with companies to achieve measurable social value goals. Stuart Heaton of LearnLive is with us to tell us all about the difference it's making across the country and how businesses can make a difference to their social value outputs. Stuart, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Dan.
So, please tell us a bit more about how LearnLive came about and how it came to be and what you do within the rail industry.
Absolutely. Thank you again for this opportunity to speak today about this piece around social value. And funny enough, my journey started in 2016 by meeting a social value manager from Balfour Beatty, who at the time was struggling to get into schools in the area that they had a project. I was actually in Lancashire, where I was based. And I'd only just set the company up at that point, and I had this idea that schools needed more information about the world of work. It wasn't easily accessible. Obviously, a lot of time you had to go into the school and speak to young people. So I just felt there may be a better way of doing it digitally. And I'd heard about some innovation in America where they were using video conferencing technology, and I thought, actually, could this be put to educational use? So I created a channel, called it Learn Live, and kept my fingers crossed and got lucky meeting a chap called Kevin Hutchinson, who still works in social value. And he, at the time, worked for Balfour Beatty and said we could really use this tool to increase our reach within schools and provide meaningful encounters and impacts for those young people in Lancashire. So we did that. We set up an interview. We did a program about their project, and we beamed that into schools. A bit Star Trek at the time, Dan, because not everybody were familiar with video conferencing technology, but it worked really well. And what was really noticeable is the engagement we got from the young people. Even in 2016, 2017, young people were more and more learning through screens, and that's how the technology was advancing, and they really engaged with what was being said. And also it's interactive as well, so they got a chance to ask questions. And there's nothing brilliant, nothing more brilliant than primary school children asking questions. They do think outside the box and they're very creative, but that's all part of the fun and engagement piece that we tried to do. So wind forward to 2019, we were very fortunate to start working with Network Rail on what turned out to be a 5-year program, where we were broadcasting rail safety messages directly into the classroom. And again, using the same technology, schools were able to access really vital information about staying safe near the railways. And for many of these schools, they were in the hotspot areas of the country. And so over that 5-year period, we actually reached over 20 million young people in over 11,500
Wow.
schools. So it showed you how big you can make that reach. And if you think about how long that would have taken a small team of community safety managers to get around that many schools, I think they'd still be at it, by the time they retire. I'm being nice there when I say that, because it is a lot of schools that to reach. And
Mhm.
obviously, when you go into a school, you don't always see everybody. It's important to include all children in that conversation. And of course, technology allows them to see these broadcasts in every single classroom. And then, of course, I know we're going to come on to it, but then we talked about setting up something which covered all schools, not just those in hotspot areas of the country. We felt after the Harrison Ballantyne story, there's a real need to reach every child, because Harrison tragically died at Daventry Depot, going through his football, and he wasn't from what was classed as a hotspot area. So I really felt that we had to do something across the whole of the country, and give children what they deserve, the knowledge to keep themselves safe wherever they are. And, luckily we had that methodology, that scalability to reach every classroom. And that's the journey we're on now, with many rail partners who are very kindly offering their support to help us do this.
It's such an important topic, isn't it? Safety, because we work in such a safety critical environment. I think a lot of times maybe can be quite guilty of thinking the safety critical nature is actually on the railways itself, not just the bits outside and how the outside environment kind of interacts with the railway as well. So you touch on a really valuable point there that actually there's a lot more to be done, and not only, as you say, within schools, but with the wider community as well. You see these videos that Network Rail are releasing about how people use level crossings and maybe don't take the warnings as seriously as they should. And actually, there's going into schools. It's not just one one time thing and then it's done. There's a continual effort from an educational perspective, so it's really, really important that we do so. And I think rail companies have kind of accepted that they have a duty to do that now. We've seen that with social value becoming so much more important over the last few years. So how are you working with companies at the moment? What are all the different ways that you're working with companies to make a tangible difference in the communities that they serve?
The real difference here, I suspect, in why companies engage with us is, and this is not being critical of social value, but in some cases it can be seen as a bit of a tick box exercise.
Mm,
You do important work in the community. You maybe do some gardening, build a shed. The things that will have impacts on people's lives. Um, but when it comes to young people, as I said earlier, I mean, we've all got a duty of care, not just the teachers and parents, but everybody in society has a duty of care to ensure that those young people stay safe. And if we are able to give the rail industry something that provides them with access to those young people and making them feel more safe around in their community and have the knowledge to stay safe, then that is a brilliant starting point for a conversation with a school, with young people, with parents. And I think that's why in this particular case companies are seeing real true value in social value, not just a monetized value, but actually it is making a difference. It's going to make a difference for the rest of those young people's lives. They will never forget the lesson they have with these companies who are saying, look, please use our railway system, please catch trains, cross level crossings safely, but please be careful wherever else you go because you need to respect the railway. And that's a life lesson. That's not something that you necessarily teach as part of maths, English, science, as a part of the curriculum,
mm.
although obviously steps are heading in that direction towards putting it on the curriculum. However, this is a life lesson for us, and we just need to make sure our young people stay safe, not just around the rail, but around the roads, water. You know, there's other aspects of the community which can also put them in danger. So yeah, for me, Dan, it's that tangible difference as you mentioned there that we're making, and not just almost going through the motions to do some social value activities. This is rail telling schools and the wider community, we're building on we're in your area, we're building new machinery, we're building new infrastructure, we're driving trains for your community. We have a responsibility to make sure you stay safe at the same time as us being in your community. So I think that's a really valuable opportunity for rail companies to do this.
Completely agree. And as you mentioned earlier, that you've been going quite a few number of years now, really, and across many challenges as well. When you mentioned 2019, I think, oh, actually, this had been ideal during the COVID years, for example, as well, from a digital perspective. How have various businesses got involved over the time?
In a number of ways, really. Some want to use it to quite purely recruit apprenticeships into their organization. Some want to, offer work experience. They're the quite obvious ones to work with schools. Some do it because they want to get that social value, but at the same time, build stronger relationships. I'm getting a sense now that people, as good as digital is, and both of us sit on digital channels in our own way, I think people just want substantial relationships, meaningful relationships
Yeah.
with schools. And as much as our broadcasts are great, I do wonder if we need to ensure that companies do have the chance then to go into schools physically and meet up with young people, parents, and teachers. And of course, starting off that conversation digitally does enable you to do that, because you've already made them safe by talking to them about rail safety or talking about road safety or whatever the message may be. And then you can go in later and say, hey, we offer these fantastic opportunities to come and work for us now and in the future. And it's, like I say, it's a great place to start a conversation. But businesses have used it as a way of also just showcasing what the world's going to look like in 5-10 years time, because these companies are changing rapidly. The society is changing rapidly. AI is coming in pretty much everywhere you go now. So they are getting involved because they're future-proofing their companies as well. And they want to make sure that the future talent is knowledgeable enough to know what they need to take whilst in school, which subjects to take, where they can find work experience and placements and internships to ensure that they are ready to hit the ground running when they come to work for these organizations. So yeah, there's a whole raft of different things, but I think our most enjoyable ones is sometimes we just have people doing live Q&As and throw them in front of a load of primary school children. It's amazing what questions they come up with. And, I think deep down inside, a lot of the directors who come onto our live chats, really enjoy that, because it's fun. They don't know what they're going to be asked. Obviously, we do moderate it, but within reason, they do enjoy that experience. And it gives them a chance to, speak to young people directly who, I've never heard of them before, and learn something every time we do these broadcasts. Somebody does learn a little bit more about what's out there, which is what we've ever always wanted at LearnLive, is just helping young people understand there is a wider world outside those school gates.
It's incredibly invaluable, that experience, not only from the kids' perspective as well, but as you say, from those directors who, kind of understand some of the challenges and thoughts, and from the wider community as well, even at whatever age. And looking at this, and we're talking about making that tangible difference and the tangibility from putting my business hat on now and writing bids and tenders and things like that. This is an incredibly useful tool for demonstrating how you're providing value from a social perspective, and looking at the RSSB social value tool and things like that. Why do you feel now it's more important, and why it's more of a focus for businesses to do things this way than it might not have been a few years ago?
Yeah, I think it's always been there. I think what we're finding, though, the pressure's on now companies to deliver even more social value on those contracts. I've heard of upwards of 20% of the total order value being asked of them to generate social value. So that's a huge challenge, especially for organizations who are not used to maybe working with schools, because some of them have never really had the chance, the opportunity, or the time to develop those relationships. So here we come along saying, well, actually, we've got schools who are really keen to want to work with you, and we can do it digitally. So you don't have to necessarily come outside of your offices and deliver it yourself, but you still get the benefits of that social value. Many of our companies, though, do want to do more beyond that initial digital engagement, and will go in to see the schools separately. But at least they've made an impression on that social value target. And they are generous. You train a young person to stay safe, and it's one of the metrics of the RSVT tool, which is, as you know, pioneered by Loop and the RSSB, which the rail industry uses. There's a metric in there, a monetarized metric, which you can use for all our rail safe friendly programs. So if we deliver into 10 schools for you over a 12-month period, you're looking upwards towards £300,000 worth of social value just for that baseline project. You can work with us, and it equates roughly down to, for every pound you spend, you get £28 back. And there's not many social value metrics that give you such a high reward. But if you think about it, it should do. Because what you're doing is you're training young people to stay safe in their communities. And it could be a life-saving message to stop something like Harrison Ballantyne happening again, where, the sad truth is Harrison went to get his football back and didn't even realize what a depot was, and thought it was a bit of a playground, jumped on the train and got electrocuted. we have to stop that from happening. It's so important that kids of Harrison's age know that that's an absolute no-go zone. And you know what? You can always buy another football. So these companies can get in front of that and go to all children in this country and teachers and parents, these are the danger zones. Please stay away. Even we find it dangerous to go on, and we are professionals. We wear PPE, and we have to be fully trained. Honestly, you are putting yourself in an incredible risk by even going anywhere near these areas. So that's why the social value is higher than perhaps recruiting somebody, which doesn't give you as much as a return. It's still valuable. However, what a great way of getting social value, but also making that meaningful difference. And the actual toolkit is very simple to use. If for many companies, they'll be aware of it. But we can help companies, calculate that as part of their work with us and make sure they get the right measure and the right value for the projects they do with us. And for our higher level partners, the ones who are on gold level, Dan, they're getting over 4 million, in social value per year. And that can go a long way towards, those 20% targets that they need to reach.
I think that's such a huge benefit that you're able to quantify it in such a way. And I'm just thinking this from an SME's perspective as well, because as to say, we know that social value is really, really important to the companies that they're working with, not only from actually demonstrating how you do it, but as you say, that safety critical element, making sure actually the work site is as safe as it can be from all angles, both inside and outside. But from an SME point of view, it can be quite daunting, can't it, sometimes, because they're a small team. They're really focusing on the operations and making sure they do a good job to get the new work in. And sometimes you look at this and think, oh, I've got, a lot of social value stuff that I really want to be doing and should be doing as well, but I don't know when I've got the time to do it. So this seems like a sensible solution for these companies, that actually they can go in and work hand in hand with you to still deliver social value and not to have to do as much as they might need to, or from an affordability perspective, because that sounds quite crass, but from an affordability perspective, your tier ones can bring in a social value champion that purely focuses on that and has a real focus on that. But from SMEs, it's a different outlook, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why a lot of the SMEs do use us, because of that reason. They are restricted by the number of people they have working for them. They haven't got the luxury of time to maybe go into schools. You can be talking of a full half day, just to get to the school, deliver what you need to do, and then come away again, and then get back behind your desk. So to have an option like this, where you can provide a service, that we provide to school, or we can actually provide that service for them, gives the companies chance to then almost cherry pick really what they want to do next. So they've got those 10 schools, say, they've got the warm leads now into those schools. They know exactly who to contact. We obviously help facilitate that as well. And then they can follow up strategically which schools they want to continue that relationship with, where they can. So there's no pressure. We never put pressure on the companies. We don't say you must work with all 10 directly. What we say is, you have the opportunity to do a follow-up. And, I have to say, this industry is amazing in the sense of it's got so many inspiring people working within it who genuinely want to keep communities safe. So when they go to their employees and say, we're working with LearnLive, there's a scramble to get their school nominated. They want their school to be the one who's made rail safe in the first place. But then it gives them the chance to go in and talk about their job, to maybe do a STEM project with them, something that really promotes rail. And, you and I both know that rail industry is underplayed when it comes to what young people know of it. And there's so many jobs within it that don't get promoted and advertised. And there's a great opportunity right there for these companies to go in and tell them more about rail and what the offer is. And, maybe in 2 or 3 years' time, when we've got all the schools in the UK, I think rail's got a massive opportunity here to promote with, these opportunities to those young people who they made safe in the first place, to then come work for them.
Absolutely. So what does the future of LearnLive look like in the next few years? What are your aims and objectives for the company?
So, if you recall at the beginning of our conversation, we very much were led by that broadcast model, going in digitally to schools, and they're great. Don't get me wrong, we do these half-hour broadcasts, sometimes longer. We sometimes do all-day broadcasts, and you see the chat alive with questions. But I always get a sense that, what's next? We've got in that moment or in those moments, you have lots of engagement, but it then just seems to dissolve a little bit, and then till the next broadcast comes along. So I've always had this desire, Dan, and that these companies and schools need to be more permanently connected, and otherwise it's a bit of a wasted opportunity, just getting companies engaged for a short period of time and then losing that connection. So we've built something called the Career Friendly Program, which in its simplest sense is a mapping tool for schools to put their hand up and put themselves on the map, quite literally, and say, we want help. We need help with our careers program. And we ask the same question of businesses. Do you want to work with schools? So what we're left with then is an ecosystem of schools and businesses who want to work together on a long-term basis and more closely than perhaps has been achieved before. Because one of the biggest problems I've found with industry, in any industry, is when they say, oh, we'll work with our local school, they quite often don't know who to speak to in that school. So they'll send an email to the office, and it often doesn't get to the right person. And we've had numerous examples of that within rail alone, where they have tried over the years to reach out to schools and not really got much in return. And therefore, we're giving them this direct line of sight to the very people in schools who do need to know these opportunities exist. And that's where Career Friendly comes in. So I'm excited to do that. And really, this has all been born out of the Rail Safe Friendly program, which brought companies closer together on safety. And we do that every year now. Every year, schools are going to be kept safe. But we're adding an extra layer now of saying, well, actually, let's include in that careers and knowledge. And I know it's been quite a journey, Dan, since the start of the year, since we launched this program. And the biggest thing I found, if I'm being honest, is schools are their knowledge is very low on companies that are within a few miles of their school. And, they don't know about these big brands that in the rail industry, we presume that everybody knows about, people like Freightliner and the train operators and tier one contractors. But the truth is, the knowledge on the ground isn't there. So I do think there's, again, a massive opportunity. I know I've used that phrase a few times, but it is to literally put rail on the map so that young people and parents and teachers can find them, ask questions, and then develop those relationships. But the first thing we must do is make them aware that these companies exist in the first place and understand what they do, because there's some amazing companies who work in rail who are just not getting the publicity that they deserve.
It's a very interesting challenge, that, isn't it? The raising profile. And I think it does highlight the challenge that rail does face, because if you look at it from an educational perspective, there's so many good jobs out there that aren't necessarily, as simple as going out on the lines in, orange high vis and doing the job. There's so many different jobs behind that actually, young people might not be aware of. So you say bridging that gap is a hell of a challenge, but it's an exciting one at the same time for the industry, isn't it? Making it more attractive and what have you. How do businesses get involved with you? How do they get in touch? What's the best way to contact you?
Well, there's a couple of ways. Obviously, railsafefriendly.com. That's the web address for anybody who wants to help us with this journey of reaching every school by 2027 and keep them rail safe. So railsafefriendly.com. That we do a lot on LinkedIn as well around that, where we support our partners with their key messages. So that's one avenue. And of course, you can come to LearnLive's main website, learnliveuk.com. That's learnliveuk.com. You can just get in touch with us through there. Either myself or the team will get back in touch with you and see how we can help you and support you in what you're trying to do.
Amazing. Stuart, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Dan.
I think social value being such an important focus, especially from what I've seen from a bid perspective over the last few years, it's really something now that businesses need to take seriously. And maybe because you don't know how to approach it or how to how to even address that and how to engage with schools. I think it's so important that you have companies like LearnLive that help you to achieve to do that and actually make a tangible difference, not just a tick box exercise in the communities that you serve. So Stuart, thank you for joining us. And if you are interested in LearnLive and how they can help you, then please do get in touch with them. And thank you for joining for another episode of Rail Industry Connected. You can view past and future episodes of Rail Industry Connected on YouTube or listen to them on your way into work on Spotify. And of course, you can connect with other rail businesses and the industry on railindustryconnect.co.uk. Thank you and see you next time.